You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com. Now, here's your host, Mason Choate.
Welcome to the HawgBeat Hour. I'm your host, Mason Choate, joined by managing editor of HawgBeat.com, Andrew Hutchinson, and recruiting expert at HawgBeat, Alex Trader. Guys, happy to have you along. Happy to have all of you listeners out there. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, leave a thumbs up if you don't mind. If you don't like it, don't do it. But I don't see why you wouldn't like it because we do a great job. Andrew Hutchinson does a great job. Alex does a great job. And HawgBeat as a whole does a great job. But let's talk some basketball, guys. So we're going to start with basketball today, and then we're going to move into a little bit of football. As most of you probably know, it's a slow time for football. And then we'll talk baseball, get you set for the Round Rock Classic, and we'll get you on your way. So, guys, Arkansas beats Tennessee and Bud Walton. As always, some of you might be thinking that's old news, but for us, our last episode came out before that game happened. So, let's just mention it. Arkansas wins 58-48 over Tennessee in Bud Walton. Real quick, Hutch, just takeaways. I know you got there at halftime. I was actually there for the whole game, but I want to ask you because you're the expert. Just big takeaway from that game.
Well, I can't imagine it was a very aesthetically pleasing game to watch if you are one of those people that like to see points scored, because it was, as you said, 58-48, not a lot of points. But it just kind of shows you that Arkansas has been playing elite level defense. Tennessee has been a really good defensive team as well. But you were able to do just enough and got the job done. You also got it done. I believe JD Notae fouled out late in that game. I think they had to play the last, 3 minutes or so without him. And that was kind of a scary thing. Like, oh, can they hang on without Notae? And they did that, and they honestly were able to win by double digits in the end. So really good win for Arkansas. Another quad one win. That's just going to be massive for the NCAA tournament resume. Helps you with your net rankings. And also it helped you with your AP ranking. You went from 23 to 18 basically based off of that win. I don't think they really got much of a boost from the blowout win at Missouri, but just a really solid win for Arkansas in another top 25 showdown at Bud Walton Arena.
Yeah, we won't sit here and spend a whole lot of time on Tennessee, but a few things that I did want to mention was, Hutch, you mentioned the Notae fouled out. And you've seen the play of Devontae Davis go up. He's continued to get better. We'll talk about that more when we talk about the Florida game. Another thing that was interesting was at the end of the first half, KK Robinson came in for a few minutes, didn't really do much, but that was an interesting thing. So it seemed like with Notae in foul trouble, Robinson was the third guy off the bench, of course, behind Davis and Chris Likes. But I'll bring Alex in on this one. Arkansas held Santiago Vescovi to only 7 points, and he was 2 of 13 shooting. So Arkansas continues to key on the opponent's best player, and they defend him really well. So, that's got to be key for a team moving forward, Alex.
Yeah, I also tuned into this game a little bit late, and I saw that he was kind of being held to nothing, and you really are just like, you have to be proud of what Eric Musselman's defense has been able to do for this team in the last couple of weeks. It's really just, like you said, locking down the other team's best player. You want to go in and, especially against these top teams, you can't let their best player beat you. And the secondary and the tertiary pieces aren't doing it for the Tennessees, for the Auburns. And that's really a testament to how well the defense is playing, as well as, just not making as many mistakes as we saw earlier on in the season. It looks like there's more synergy. It looks like the team is able to kind of play off of each other and has an identity versus what we saw maybe a little bit earlier on.
All right, well, let's move on to Florida because that is the most recent thing. So Arkansas defeated Florida 82-74 in Gainesville on Tuesday night. First time to do it since 1995. Hutch, you had a few cool little tidbits about this game. I'd have to go back and look at your story, but I assume that you know some of them off the top of your head.
Yeah, I know a few of them, but you mentioned that. I mean, they had lost 14 straight games in Gainesville, hadn't won there since '95. That was, of course, the team that went back to the national championship game and lost to UCLA back when Corliss Williamson, Scotty Thurman, and those guys were still playing. So that it's been a while. None of the current players were alive. I mean, personally, I wasn't even 1 year old yet. So it has been a long time. But also the win made it was Arkansas's fifth win on the road in SEC play. They are now guaranteed, even if they lose to Tennessee in the regular season finale in Knoxville, they're guaranteed to finish with a winning record on the road in SEC play for the second straight year. The 25 years before that, they had done that exactly twice. So they've done it in back-to-back years after doing it that many times in 25 years. Pretty incredible that this team has had so much success on the road. Of course, it helps that a couple of those wins were Georgia and Missouri, two of the worst teams in the SEC. But I mean, you also beat uh, Florida, which you just don't have very much success there. And I'm is blanking on the other ones that they've won, and they've been close. I mean, they almost beat Alabama. They almost beat Texas A&M earlier in the season. So it is just remarkable the success that they have had on the road this year, and not just on the road, but they've also of course have the massive home court advantage of Bud Walton Arena. But to have the success away from home has to give you a lot of reason for excitement for for postseason, because obviously you're not going to be playing the NCAA tournament in Bud Walton Arena.
Yeah. So the thing about this game was, and you kind of mentioned, it was a close game at Alabama. This was a close game for basically the entire second half. I mean, at one point, Arkansas is down 62-56 after Castleton makes a 3-point play, and then Arkansas comes back and they eventually get two back-to-back 3-pointers from Jalen Williams and Stanley Amude. If you're talking 10 games ago, if you say that Jalen Williams and Stanley Amude were the guys who had back-to-back 3-pointers to keep Arkansas in the game late in the game, I mean, Hutch, would you believe that?
No, I mean, I might have believed Amude just because he's a guy that has a proven track record of being able to make shots like that. But Jalen Williams, I think, is the fact that he can step out and make those shots here and there. He still doesn't shoot them at a high rate. I mean, I even told another one person in the media during the Tennessee game, I said, man, if he could just shoot 30% from 3-point range, I think that would make him just an incredible player, because then you really have a threat from the outside, and that just really opens things up for the offense. So the fact that those guys knock down the clutch shots, and that's the other thing about Jalen is it feels like when he does make the threes, even though it's not a high rate, they have been in just incredibly vital spots. He had one early in the year that was also late in the game and was a really clutch shot. So that is remarkable. I think it was against LSU. That's the other road game I forgot earlier. That he just has a knack for that. And I mean, that's just Jalen Williams for him. I mean, that dude is just playing incredible basketball right now, and might be the most important player on the team. You could argue for JD Note, of course, but Jalen Williams has been just so vital to this run of success they're on.
Yeah, that was one thing that he talked about on Wednesday in the media availability. He said that he worked with his dad growing up, and his dad told him, "Hey, you can't be a traditional big because then you're not really providing much. You have to provide more than what a traditional big does." And that has led to him being able to step out, make shots like that, prove that he can do more than just, play down low and catch a few bodies. But Alex, I want to ask you about the defense, because Arkansas against Florida, they outscored them 28-14. They're in the closing stretch. And then, I mean, I'm looking at this. Florida was 3 of 11 from the floor, missed all 6 of their 3-point attempts in that run where it was 28-14. So this Arkansas defense, Eric Musselman talked on Wednesday about how he's told the team, like, you guys need to be like the 1985 Bears defense. And he said, like, some of the guys kind of looked at him and didn't know what that meant. But I think we all understand how dominant that defense was. So for Arkansas to try to make their defense like that, that it's something special.
Yeah, and against Tennessee, we saw really just lockdown defense the entire game. Here, it wasn't quite that. Florida's still able to get 74 points in this one, But when it mattered, like you said, Arkansas really just locked in, locked down, and took over. And when you're able to do that, not only at home, but also on the road, you're going to be a really dangerous team. Like Hutch said, going into the postseason, going into the SEC tournament, the NCAA tournament, because you don't have that home court advantage. You don't have that same type of energy coming in. The saying is defense travels in almost any sport, and especially in basketball, because it makes it tough for other teams. If you're able to have that high motor on defense, you're going to find buckets on offense because you're wearing out the other team. And that's really just how it goes. So being able to lock in at the end of the game, even after you've already been fighting for 35 minutes and able to close out those last 5 minutes is just so important to going on this run that we've seen.
Arkansas in this game, they had 5 guys score double-digit points. That includes, okay, so let's just name them off: J.D. Notae, Stanley Umude, Jalen Williams, Audis Toney, and Devontae Davis. Devo Davis having 19 points, including, the finisher slam there close to the end where he got the technical. But Hutch, this team, how often have we seen them go really cold offensively, and especially really cold from three? And they're not a high-volume three-point shooting team, but it seems like they can make the shots when they need to make the shots. It really feels like this team in the second half, if they need a bucket, they can go get a bucket. And I don't know if that's really been the case, especially earlier in the season, but in years past for Arkansas.
Yeah, it seems like this team is developing kind of a killer instinct late in games whenever they really need to. It's one of those things where, like, for example, I think I mentioned this in our game thread during the Florida game. It was a tight game. I think under 4 media timeout. There was 3-something left, and I was just like, man, I think we all know how this game's going to turn out, because we've seen so many of those kind of games go Florida's way in Gainesville. But this team didn't let that happen. I mean, they just made clutch shot after clutch shot. I think J.D. Note had that, sidestep, pump fake, sidestep 3 from the left wing with just over a minute left that put up Arkansas up by 4. That was kind of the dagger. And then they also, continued to knock down free throws. They think they shot like 85% from the free throw line in that game. So it just kind of shows this team just has a really good, finishing mentality, that they generally pull out these close games more than they don't.
All right, before we wrap it up and hit the break and head into the next segment, Hutch, I do want to ask you real quick the turnovers. So Arkansas in this game, they had 6 turnovers. We know turnovers were a big issue early in the season. They've kind of cleaned it up a little bit, but this was a Florida team that was forcing a lot of turnovers. I believe you wrote that they were forcing one of the top numbers of turnovers in the nation, and Arkansas only does it 6 times. They're really starting to play basketball smart. They're starting to make better passes. And I mean, I guess it all starts with the guards. You got Devo Davis, who was turning it over at a high rate, and you look at it, he didn't turn over the ball in this game. Let's see, Audis Toney led the team with 2 turnovers, and then nobody else had more than 1. So that has really improved, hasn't it?
I remember some episodes of this podcast early on, like really early in the season, where we were like, man, do they have a point guard? Like they've got 3 guys that are trying to play that, and it just didn't seem like any of them were really working out. There were times where Devo Davis and Chris Likes both were just like a walking turnover. I mean, I think it was maybe the Vanderbilt game or something where Devo played like 8 minutes and had like 3 turnovers. It seemed like every time he touched the ball, he was just giving it to the other team. And yet here we are a month and a half later, and they're only committing 6 turnovers in a road game at Florida against a team, I think forcing about 15 point something turnovers a game. So, less than half of what they usually do. That's just phenomenal development. That's phenomenal guys accepting their roles. And Devo Davis was a guy that probably handled the ball more than he usually does in that game. Eric Musselman mentioned it after the game that they really wanted to get out and transition more. And I think we all remember Devo last year. That was something he did well in. He would grab the ball, on one end of the floor and take it coast to coast and get to the rim and either finish with a layup or get fouled and go to the free throw line. just a really, really nice development for Arkansas that they've got guys that can take care of the ball, distribute, really nice passes, even if it doesn't always result in assists, in the stat sheet. They do pass really well, and that's just kind of shows, as I think Alex said earlier, that this team seems to just have a really good energy and really good kind of togetherness on the floor right now.
Before we wrap up, I want to ask you another question, Hutch. You mentioned that word development a lot. So Eric Musselman talks a lot in the press conferences about like weird things that they do in practice. Most recently, it's kind of been JD Notae with the towel over his head, so he's not getting as many fouls, trying to pick a steal in there. But I want to ask you about the development, like because they had all those early season turnovers, and they've been working on it in practice, and I'm sure they've been doing the craziest drills that we couldn't even draw up ourselves. It's just like little Eric Musselman things and his staff things. How key is that for this team? Because not only does that help them in practice because they're getting it from the coaches, but I feel like they kind of pick up that work ethic from the coaches who are, they're in there day in, day out trying to figure out how can we get better? How can we get better? And then you've heard from guys like Chris Slice, guys like Jalen Williams, who've been staying late after practice, trying to work harder, get better. And so I think it's translating from the coaches to the players, but I don't know. I just want to hear from you. How key is the development? And it all starts with the coaches.
Yeah, you mentioned those drills, and he does have some unique ones. And the thing that I find most impressive is that he tells us what the drills are and how, okay, this is designed to help player X get better at this area of his game. And almost every single time it's worked. I mean, you look, he talked about how Tennessee is one of the best teams in terms of forcing turnovers. They like to jump passing lanes. They like to do things like that. And they did some drills that he said were kind of like some YMCA, church league type drills where you're just, stepping into the pass and doing just really basic stuff like that. And I think they had a low turnover number against the Volunteers as well. You talk about JD Notae. He was getting really, really bad about, getting cheap fouls from just reaching in and picking up fouls and getting in foul trouble and having to sit for large stretches of game time. And what does he do against Florida? He goes the entire game without committing a single foul. So that kind of shows you that these things are working. We saw it last year with Moses Moody. He really struggled early in the year, finishing at the rim, and they did some drills where you getting hit on with bags and stuff like that as they try to finish in practice. And sure enough, he became a really good finisher at the rim last year. So these drills work. And Eric Musselman, you got to give him a lot of credit for figuring out exactly what buttons to push to make guys improve.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap this segment up. And then up next, we're going to look at the team a little closer. And then we're definitely going to preview that big Kentucky game on Saturday in Bud Walton Arena here on the HawgBeat Hour.
You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com. Now, here's your host, Mason Choate.
Back here on the HawgBeat Hour, Mason Choate, Andrew Hutchinson, and Alex Trader with you. We're the HawgBeat crew. Go check out HawgBeat.com for all of the information on Arkansas athletics that you need, covering Arkansas basketball, Arkansas football, Arkansas baseball better than anybody. So go check it out. If you're a student, Hutch has a deal to tell you about. Go ahead and tell them.
Yeah, as always, if you're a student at any college in, I guess, the world, but in the country, if you got a .edu email address, you can hit me up and I'll get you your first year of HawgBeat for just $11.95. That's usually $100. You're basically getting it for $12. That's basically 88% off. So it's a heck of a deal. You just got to shoot me an email at andrewhutchinson413@gmail.com and I will get you set up.
All right. Well, this segment, we're going to be talking about Arkansas versus Kentucky, the big matchup in Bud Walton Arena this Saturday. So let's just start off. So a lot of what we focused on in the press conference on Wednesday was Jalen Williams versus Oscar Tshiebwe. How is Arkansas going to shut him down? Because he's averaging what, Hutch? You said like 16 and 15. I mean, it's another situation where Arkansas is going to have to try to find a way to shut down the opposing team's best player. But this is a guy where it's like, how much can you actually do?
And on top of that, they've also got a couple other really good players. I mean, you shut him down, you've got a guy that's shooting 45% from three-point range. You got a couple of dynamic point guards. I mean, they just have a really deep team, really talented team. I mean, there's a reason they're top 10 in the country. So it is a incredible challenge. And Oscar Shibwe, I mean, he's right there. I mean, he's been talked about as potentially the national player of the year. And if you're averaging 16 and 15, that's just stupid. I mean, that is incredible numbers. I don't know if I remember any college basketball player in recent memory averaging that kind of stuff. So it's going to be tough. You know, he's a guy that's really good at running the floor. That's something that Jalen Williams and Eric Musselman both made sure to mention on Wednesday. Very athletic. It's not like he's like a Walker Kessler, for example, who put up incredible numbers for Auburn in the Arkansas game. He was a 7-footer. I don't think Oscar Shibwe is quite that tall. He is 6'9", 255. So he's just kind of a big body that knows how to use it. And so a really, really tough challenge for Arkansas. Everyone's talking about it's going to be Oscar Shibwe versus Jalen Williams. But the first thing Eric Musselman said today or on Wednesday was this is a team deal. Like they're going to use all 5 guys on the floor in some shape, form, or fashion to try to slow him down. So it's not just going to be on Jalen, but of course Jalen's going to be a big part of that as well, being Arkansas's big man and a guy that's averaging a double-double in SEC play himself.
Well, we know that the atmosphere it's going to be crazy in Bud Walton. I assume that it's going to be close to the level of the Auburn game, especially because it's going to be a Saturday, a little bit better than 6:00 on a Tuesday night for some people. But this is a Kentucky team that if you just look up and down their schedule, I mean, they've played quality opponents, but it seems like, I mean, they have a loss to Duke. They have a loss to Tennessee lost to Tennessee, lost to Auburn. So I mean, Arkansas, they beat Auburn, they beat Tennessee. So Alex, you get Kentucky and you're confident that Arkansas can play competitive against just about anybody. But not only are you getting Kentucky, but you're getting Kentucky in your place where you've taken down the big time opponents like your Auburns and your Tennessees.
Yeah, I've been saying it for the last couple of years, but one of the best sporting events I've ever been to live was that 2019 game where Kentucky came to Arkansas and the Hogs were starting to pull ahead, and Coach Cal got himself ejected, and it kind of flipped the script there a little bit. But that was the loudest any atmosphere I had been in live as a fan. And I'm expecting similar things this year. You've got a really talented Arkansas team that's just been really dominant lately, beating top opponents, beating bad opponents by a lot, not really leaving much up to question in terms of how these games are going. I think this is going to be an insane atmosphere, and I think that it's definitely going to help having a team that's this talented at home when you've been able to do what you did with the white out, with the red out. And there's always going to be something coming, or the fans are always going to be coming up with something. I'm expecting this to be a pretty loud one. Kind of, you don't want to compare it to that Texas game that was there for the football team earlier this year, but that same kind of atmosphere where you've got a team that really the fans don't like. And it's a nationally hyped up game that you've been kind of gearing yourself up for all year. This is one that you circled as soon as the schedule came out, like, hey, I need to go to this game. I need to take off work to be able to make it to this.
Yeah, Kentucky always does that. Whoever they're playing, no matter what, I mean, Kentucky's going to draw a crowd. But let's kind of get away from that. And I want to go back to something Hutch was talking about earlier. You were talking about Devontae Davis and how earlier in the year there was like a stretch in a game where I think you said the Vanderbilt game where it was like 8 minutes, 3 turnovers. And what we've seen him go kind of back to the guy that he was last year. And Eric Musselman said that. I'm going to read a quote here. He said he's shooting the ball with more confidence. His game is really simulating what he did last year with success. He's defending at a high level. And I think offensively, he's playing with as much confidence as he has the past 2 years. So, I mean, that's really good for Arkansas because how badly have they needed one of those guards to come off the bench and provide something offensively, just provide something at all, because it seemed like for a couple games there, they were doing more bad than they were doing good, Hutch.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a brief kind of moment where Chris Likes looked like he could be that guy, but I always wondered, like, is this sustainable? Now what we're seeing with Devo, I think it is sustainable because we saw what he did at the end of last season, and I think if he can sustain this level of play, it's going to be huge for Arkansas. I mean, the most important part of that quote you read is the very end where he's just playing with a lot of confidence. That a confident Devo is a good Devo for Arkansas and a guy that's having a lot of fun playing with emotion. I mean, you mentioned earlier the technical to end the Florida game, and he went up for a dunk and slapped the backboard. 19 seconds left. That's an automatic tee. Uh, I was kind of curious to see how Eric Musselman would react to that, and in the post game, he said, hey, I'm cool with it. He's an emotional guy. I'm an emotional guy. I'll live with it because we had already pretty much put the game away. So that kind of shows you there that Muss is comfortable with him playing that way with that emotion because that's whenever he's at his best. And if he can continue that through these last three regular season games into the SEC and NCAA tournaments, Arkansas could be playing for a while.
I'm curious. This is a question that I've kind of been, asking myself in my head, I guess, but this is a team that early in SEC play, of course, everybody knew they were struggling. Everybody was doubting them. You had your people who still held hope, but you looked at them and you're like, okay, they might make it to the NCAA tournament, but they're not last year's Elite Eight team. But now you're looking at Arkansas, and I don't know. I mean, they're 22-6, 11-4 in SEC play. You got a good shot at taking down another top 10 team in your place on Saturday. If Arkansas beats Kentucky, you're looking at a team that's 23-6. You're 12-4 in SEC play. I mean, like, of course, you got LSU and Tennessee, two talented teams, but they're starting to look like a team that, you just mentioned it, Hutch. There's a chance they could go deep in postseason play, but I guess I'll just ask you, Hutch, like, are you at the point now where you're like second guessing, like, this team can actually like go places?
Yeah, it's kind of been a slow developing thing where a month and a half ago, I didn't think they were going to make the NCAA tournament. I was telling people like, oh, I can't wait to see who they match up with in the first round of the NIT. I think that was after the Vanderbilt loss. I was saying that. But then I started thinking, okay, they've kind of righted the ship. They're going to make the NCAA tournament. Yippee. It's going to be a fun trip for one weekend. And, that's going to be it. And now, as they keep beating really good teams, I mean, I know Florida isn't, such a super sexy win, but it's a road win over a team that has had your number over the years. You start thinking like, man, this team could make a run to the second week of the NCAA tournament again. And once you make it past the first weekend, you've got a chance. I mean, you've given yourself a chance, and at that point, it's all about matchups. And that's kind of what I've started to think is like, this team could really, make a run, and that's not what I expected. I thought this would be a team, even before the season, like, maybe they could, maybe, but I really thought if they just made the NCAA tournament, I think Jackson Collier, our basketball expert at HawgBeat, wrote this in a story, is that, if they could just make the NCAA tournament, that would be a good step in the right direction because it's kind of that gap year. Yes, you had Moses Moody and everybody in that group last year, and then you've got Nick Smith, Jordan Walsh, and that group coming in next year. That's kind of the year everyone's targeted as like, oh, could Arkansas make it back to the Final Four? And yet here's this team perfectly capable of not only making the NCAA tournament, but maybe making it back to the Sweet 16 or Elite Eight.
Yeah, I mean, you said gap year, and then, I'm automatically like, well, they've just won 12 of 13 in conference play. So if this is what gap years are going to be like, then Eric Musselman, I mean, goodness gracious. And then you look at next year, like you mentioned, I don't know. I'll ask this to Alex, and then Hutch, you can go after him. Moving forward, what is the thing that worries you about this team? Because we could sit here and we can talk about all the things that they're doing right, all the things that they're doing good. But we also have to talk about, like, what do we see that could be the Achilles heel for this team? And I'll just ask you, Alex, what do you think it could be?
Yeah, usually with these hot streaks, a lot of them come on the heels of catching fire from three, catching fire from the field on the offensive side of the ball. Fortunately for the Razorbacks, that isn't necessarily the case. You're still shooting a lot better than you did earlier in the year. You're making free throws, which is a huge concern earlier in the year, but it's coming on the heels of great defensive performances, great defensive effort. Really, I mean, the only thing that I think can get to this team is riding too high. It's a really energetic team. It's a team that's built off of emotion, like we've been talking about, like with Devo, like with what Musk said. You never want to get too high, and you never want to get too low in your best or your worst time. So I think having that neutral site environment could really actually benefit the Hogs, but it could hurt them if you're not able to see that home crowd juicing you up and see all the positives going on to bring you back into a game if you start to get behind.
Yeah, that reminds me, the riding too high reminds me of a quote that Dave Van Horn had this week. He said he was kind of talking about last year's SEC tournament, how the team was doing so good. And he said going into the SEC tournament, he kind of wanted them to lose a game, like, because they needed to experience that loss, come back down to earth. I think Arkansas had that against Alabama, but it's like now you're on another win streak. How long is that going to last? But Hutch, go ahead and answer that same question. I just wanted to add that in there.
Yeah, I think the one thing that kind of would scare me is if Jalen Williams gets in early foul trouble in a game or something like that, or maybe JD Note, although they've shown that they can survive without JD Note. I don't know if they could survive without Jalen Williams. There were really tough stretches against Florida where he was out of the game and they didn't play well. I mean, I think Jalen finished plus 15 and Arkansas only won by 8. So that shows you that when he was off the floor, they were outscored by 7, and he wasn't off the floor for a ton of time. So if he gets in early foul trouble, I think then things could unravel, and it would not bode well for Arkansas. So you got to avoid that. Luckily for the Razorbacks, Jalen is a really high basketball IQ guy, and he doesn't typically get into foul trouble. That was what was so uncharacteristic about the Florida game, especially that second foul he picked up with like 6 seconds left in the first half. 90 feet away from the basket. That was very unusual. But if he can play smart and avoid foul trouble, and all the other guys can avoid foul trouble, I think they're going to be just fine and give themselves a chance at least. But if that doesn't happen, I think that could be the thing that kind of does them in.
All right. Well, Hutch, before we wrap up this segment, I posed this question on Twitter earlier this week, and everybody gave me their opinion, but and this was before the Florida game. I said, next 4 games, here's the 4 games. What's Arkansas's record? A lot of people predicted 4-0 and 3-1. I think those were more common than 2-2, 1-3, 0-4. So now you're sitting at 3 games left. You got Kentucky on Saturday, then you have LSU next Wednesday at home. So you got 2 straight home games, and then they go to Knoxville to close out the season against Tennessee. Hutch, what do you think their record is going to be over these last 3 games?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I think 2-1 would be really, really good because that means you probably split the Kentucky and Tennessee games. You'd like to think you can beat LSU at home, although it's probably gonna be tougher than when you beat them on the road because they do have their point guard back, Pinson. But yeah, I think 2-1 would be really good. 1-2 would be okay because then you're talking about a 2-2 finish from those last 4 games. I probably would have said that would have been perfectly fine. But anything worse than that, then you're probably like, oh, that's you don't feel too good. You like to see them win some games in the SEC tournament to kind of get their mojo back. But I think 2-1 would be a really, really good finish for them.
Alex, do you have any differing opinion there?
No, I think 2-1 is also fair. I do, however, think, I think this Kentucky game is very, very winnable for this team. I would be more concerned if this team's able to win Saturday, how are you going to be able to continue that momentum? We've seen them do it a couple times after that big Auburn win, after that big Tennessee win, but it continuously winning these games and getting so high can make it a little bit difficult to keep that going, especially for a team like LSU that has been struggling since their hot start at the beginning of this year. And I think Tennessee's a tough game in Knoxville, especially after what you were able to do to them in Bud Walton. You're probably not going to hold them to 40, 45 points again. So that could be an interesting one as well.
I'm curious what the stat would be on teams in the game after they beat Kentucky. Now, I'm not saying Arkansas is going to beat Kentucky, but Hutch, you had the stat in your story about teams that beat Auburn this year. All three of them. So it was UConn, Arkansas, Florida now. All three of them lost the next game. So I don't know. It just popped in my head, but that would be something to look into. Anyways, up next, we're going to talk some Razorback football, catch you up on what is going on with them. And then we'll finish the HawgBeat Hour talking some Arkansas baseball. And we'll get to all of that next.
You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com. Now, here's your host, Mason Choate.
Back here on the HawgBeat Hour, the HawgBeat crew with you. That is myself, Mason Choate, Andrew Hutchinson, and Alex Trader. Guys, we're going to talk a little bit of football right now. Not a lot going on, but we do know that spring practice is starting up here in a few weeks. So that's on March 13th. And Hutch, you've started a little series over at HawgBeat.com. Go check it out. That's HawgBeat, BEAT.com. You're doing burning questions for spring ball. You're previewing your most recent one was who's going to be the starting left tackle for Arkansas. Maybe give us an inside look into that and maybe some more stuff you got coming.
Yeah, it's crazy that we're already talking about spring ball. It feels like they just beat Penn State in the Outback Bowl, but here we are. But yeah, the burning questions series, just kind of some topics that are kind of the biggest questions facing Arkansas entering these 15 practices. And to me, the first thing that came to my mind was that left tackle spot, because they do return 4 of their 5 starting offensive linemen from this past season. But they do lose Myron Cunningham, who played almost every snap for you at left tackle. Who the heck is going to be that guy? Because there wasn't really like a set backup that was, okay, this guy's clearly the number 2. Like if Myron goes down with an injury, this guy is definitely who fills in for him. There was a lot of uncertainty there, and there still is in my mind. I would love to get to talk to Sam Pittman. Hopefully we get to talk to him soon. And that's going to be one of the things I ask him is, who all are you looking at there? Because they've got some options. I mean, maybe you could move Dalton Wagner over from the right side. I don't know if they would do that because I think he was pretty solid on the right side. Do you move Brady Latham from guard to tackle? They did that a little bit. He played some right tackle during the season. Could he play left tackle? I'm not 100% sure. Could it be one of those young former 4-star recruits that they're really high on? You know, Tykees Crawford and Jalen St. John. Those guys are guys that Sam Pittman really views as guards moving forward, but they've also practiced a lot at tackle. I mean, there's so many options there that would make sense, but we just don't know who that's going to be. And I'm sure they're going to look at multiple different guys and multiple different combinations, even with the 4 guys they got coming back.
Well, I think if it's anything related to offensive line, that's really something that you don't need to worry about, especially with the guy that you have as the head coach. And even Cody Kennedy, I mean, we know now that he's a very good offensive line coach. So for those of you who just love football content and you're not a big baseball guy or basketball guy, you can subscribe to HawgBeat.com, get up on the message board on the trough, and you can talk football with the other guys, because there's plenty of people on the message board that are dying for some football talk. And speaking of football talk, Alex, on Wednesday you had your linebacker big board come out for the 2023 class. Talk about that, and then also, I mean, you have now created a big board home where you can find all of your big boards.
Yeah, and you're going to be able to find that on the trough, like you mentioned. For subscribers, it's where you can go in, talk about whatever's going on. I'll post in there whenever there's updates to the big boards. But this week we did go with the linebackers in our series. So we've still got, corners, safeties, athletes, and then special team guys still to work through. But this was a bigger list than I thought when you combine the inside and outside linebackers. A couple big targets. Tackett Curtis is one that Hutch was able to go see in Louisiana earlier this year or last football season, and got to talk to him. There's some good stories up about him on HawgBeat. Really a top 50 player. I think he's ranked 41 in Rivals 100, and he's got legitimate interest in the Hogs, values the loyalty of them coming out to see him, even when he was hurt, reciprocated with a visit, has been on the hill a couple of times. He's a guy to keep an eye on, definitely as a top target for the staff, as well as guys like Carmelo Overton, and then Troy Ford Jr., who recently said that UCF is his number one school, but Arkansas is in that top 5 mix. There's a lot going on at that linebacker position. You lose 2 guys, and then you'll be losing Bumper Pool after this season, who have really anchored that position for the Hogs. And these are some guys who might be able to help fill that question mark, as well as one who's already committed, Everett Rousseau, out of Georgia. I believe it's Cedar Grove. So continuing that pipeline has been a big help for that Razorback recruiting.
Well, there's not really much else to talk about when it comes to football, but Hutch, with spring ball right around the corner, I just want to ask you, give us a season prediction of what you think Arkansas's record is going to be. I'm just kidding, by the way. Don't answer that question.
Oh, gosh. I was going to say, man, we don't even know what the depth chart looks like yet. Ask me after spring ball, and I might be able to give you a better answer.
Okay. I mean, people eat that stuff up. So if you gave a season prediction right now, I mean, that might be the most popular story on the message board. So
how about this? 12-0 right there. Boom.
Oh, I'm going to clip that, and I'm going to post it before the season, and then you're going to get roasted. So anyways,
for what it's worth, last year before or after spring ball, I gave an 8-4 prediction for the regular season. So, keep an eye out on whatever I have to say.
I'm gonna have to see receipts on that because I don't remember that. Go ahead.
I think it was for a different platform. Might have been my website. It might have been over at another one.
Oh, maybe the platform inside of your head that you just didn't.
No, I'll find the receipts and send them over.
Okay. All right. Well, that wraps up football talk. Up next, we're gonna have Hutch and I. We're gonna talk some Arkansas baseball. Get you set for the Round Rock Classic, and then we will get you on your way here on the HawgBeat Hour.
You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com. Now, here's your host, Mason Choate.
All right, we're back here on the HawgBeat Hour. Just myself and Andrew Hutchinson this segment talking some Razorback baseball. So opening weekend has come and gone. Arkansas went 2-1 against Illinois State, dropped the Friday night game, the opening day game. It was a little bit of a shocker. Did not see that one coming, but then as Dave Van Horn said after that game, saying, he thought they would bounce back. They did Saturday and Sunday with 2 wins, and now they're getting set. I guess they're in Round Rock now. So as we're recording this, they're in Round Rock. But let's go back to opening weekend, Hutch. Just let's start with Friday, because Arkansas did not lose the game on the mound. That's for sure. Connor Nolan did his job. If you want to read more about that, I wrote a story. And then Hutch, of course, always has his key takeaways, but it was not a game lost on the mound. It was lost at the plate for Arkansas.
100%. I think they only gave up 3 runs the entire game. If you would have told me before the hand that Illinois State would score 3 runs, I said, okay, Arkansas probably won, 8-3 or something like that. That just didn't happen. Arkansas couldn't get the clutch hit. Their only runs came on home runs in a span of 3 batters in the middle innings there. So just a really disappointing, performance at the plate, really all weekend, if we want to be honest, but especially that first game, 0 for 5 with runners in scoring position, just couldn't get anything going offensively. And it resulted in your first season opening loss since 1994.
Which some people were okay with because it's a good omen for the basketball team. But if you look back at the Friday night game, though, the big takeaway for most people was 1 through 5 in the lineup went 0 for 17. 1 through 5 in the lineup, 0 for 17. I mean, are you ever going to win a game when that happens? Probably not, especially when you're 1 through 5 is what Arkansas's 1 through 5 is. And we know that I'm not saying the back end of the lineup is bad, because Arkansas's lineup is just loaded up and down, but you can't have 5 guys in the lineup go 0 for 17.
Yeah, that was really surprising, because a lot of those guys have been swinging the bat really, really well. I mean, Dave Van Horn mentioned specifically Jace Borfin, the transfer from Oklahoma. He had been swinging the bat really, really well, and he goes 0 for the weekends. And, Caden Wallace had been just absolutely tearing the cover off in the scrimmages that we saw, and he goes over. And I mean, yeah, he made some good contact, and he had one that probably, had it not been for the wind, probably would have gone out of the park for a home run. But still, I think he went 0 for 4. And to see the top of the lineup that is so talented, like Peyton Stovall, Robert Moore, preseason All-American, all of those guys went hitless. And I think Dave said after the game, I think his quote was something along the lines of, I hope I don't see all those zeros ever again. And I would be very, very surprised if Arkansas has a game like that the rest of the season.
It was interesting because it was almost exactly how they ended the year last year. The pitching was fine and you just couldn't hit. So it was a little scary. Like, it's kind of like every time you see a foul ball popped up over to the first base line, it's like, oh my goodness, here we go again. But Saturday they bounced back, and Hagen Smith, 6 innings, gave up 5 hits, but no runs, no earned runs, 5 strikeouts and a walk. Hagen Smith, Dave Van Horn kind of threw a little nugget in there Tuesday where, and you and I talked about it afterwards. He said sometimes your Saturday guy is the guy that you're expecting to be the ace. Now, I'm not saying that that's what Dave Van Horn was saying about Hagen Smith, but Hagen Smith looked like he could be an ace on Saturday against Illinois State.
I think most people would agree that Hagen Smith probably has the best potential out of the two, first 2 starters. I mean, Connor Noland, I think, probably gets a bad rap from some fans. I mean, I think he's a very, very good college pitcher, and I think he's going to get a shot at pro ball, and maybe he does something. But in terms of prospect ranking, like, Connor Noland's not going to be a first-round pick. I mean, maybe he turns into that, and that's not an insult to Connor Noland in the slightest. But Hagen Smith, he's a guy that in a couple of years he could hear his name called in the first round of the MLB draft, just like Jackson Wiggins in Game 3, who we'll talk about. But he's got that potential, really good left-handed arm. Plus, he's a true freshman going out there on his first start and going 6 innings. That was probably the thing that surprised me the most. Not that he gave up 0 runs or any of that. It was that he went 6 innings. That's a really long outing. I think he threw like 77 pitches, something like that. That's a long first outing on opening weekend under Dave Van Horn, and he did it as a true freshman. That to me was the most incredible part of that start.
Yeah, a lot to look forward to with Smith this season. And I mean, he's going to start against Stanford on Saturday in Round Rock. So, but let's keep this going because we don't have a lot of time. I do want to mention on Saturday, your big names did get it going at the plate a little bit. So Robert Moore, he had 2 hits. Let's see how many. He had 2 hits, 3 RBI, and then Caden Wallace had 2 hits, and then Michael Turner, he also had 2 hits. So going to Sunday's game. So the one pitcher that you mentioned, Connor Noland, he gets a bad rap, but you still expected stuff from him. You expected him to do a good job. Jackson Wiggins, the guy that you were probably least confident about in the 3 starters. And then Wiggins goes out, throws 5 innings. He got in trouble quite a bit. He got hit around, but he got out of jams. And that's one thing that he didn't do last year. And he did it on Sunday against Illinois State. So 5 innings, gave up 5 hits, but he only allowed one run, and it was earned. And then he struck out 5. And I mean, his velocity was there. He had some off-speed stuff going. But the biggest thing, as I mentioned, he was getting out of jams, getting out of trouble, and keeping himself going.
Yeah, again, he went 5 innings. That's more than he went in any outing last year. I think his longest was 3 2/3. And I believe that was in the SEC tournament. So for him to make it through 5 innings was huge for Arkansas. Yeah, he got to hit around a little bit more than you would like, but being able to mentally work through those jams, we've seen that with pitchers in the past, guys that hadn't been able to do that, or maybe they weren't able to do it early in their career and then they were later. Like Isaiah Campbell comes to mind. On that 2018 team, he was that Game 3 starter, and he just couldn't quite work through those jams, and things would unravel for him very quickly. And then he comes back the next year and he's the ace. Maybe that's something that could develop for Jackson Wiggins. But the fact that he made it through 5 innings on opening weekend was, to me, another really, really good development for Arkansas.
And then, I mean, maybe the biggest story of the day was Cole Ramage going 4 innings and getting a save, only allowing 2 hits, had 6 strikeouts, gave up an earned run. It was on a home run. But, man, it looked really good, that off-speed pitch. Of course, we're not gonna say anything. We're not gonna make any comparisons on this podcast, Andrew Hutchinson. But Cole Ramage looked good in a 4-inning relief, and then got the save there. I mean, if you want to know more about that, we talked to Zebulon Vermillion on this week's edition of the Diamond Hawks podcast. Asked him about Cole Ramage. The two of them are close, so if you want to hear more about that, go listen to that. But Hutch, what do you think of Cole Ramage?
Man, it's hard not to be impressed because not only did he go 4 innings on Sunday, but he also threw 1 1/3 innings, I believe, on Friday. So he's a guy that could pitch twice in a weekend and come back and throw a lot of pitches. Again, we don't want to make comparisons or anything, but it could be kind of a similar role as what Kevin Kopps had last year. I don't expect him to go 4 innings on Friday and 4 innings on Sunday, and without allowing a single run. But he's a guy that could pitch twice and pitch in really big situations, whether it be, save opportunities or just middle innings. He has really developed and gotten a lot better because he's a guy he's a super senior. This is his 5th year. He would not be able to play college baseball in normal situations, but the COVID years changed things. And it looks like he's really taken advantage of, that extra year. I'm really excited to see what he can do this year.
At the plate, the highly touted freshman, Peyton Stovall, he finally got a hit on Sunday. He actually got 2 of them. And then you look down the lineup. So Robert Moore, 2 more hits. Brady Slavens moves to the DH after playing right field the first 2 days. Didn't look, let's just say it, he didn't look like an all-star in right field, but he looked a little bit better at DH, went 3 for 3. So I think that we might see Slavens just stick in that DH slot, and then we'll see the outfield of Gregory, Borfin, and Lanzilli, and then mix Webb in there a little bit. Is that, I'm assuming that you believe that as well, Hutch?
I'm not 100% sure. I think Dave Van Horn is still kind of figuring that out. He mentioned in his midweek availability this week that he kind of has the defensive, the best defensive alignment. He has the best offensive alignment. And it's just a matter of what he really is looking for on any particular day. If you're needing a game where you need to score a lot of runs, like it's game 3 and you don't have a lot of pitching and you're going to need to score a lot to win, maybe you go with the offensive lineup. Or if it's a Friday and it's going to be runs at a premium, maybe you go with the defensive lineup. I think Dave Van Horn has a lot of options. I think that's the number one thing right now is he's got different alignments, different combinations he can use on any given night.
Well, if you're itching for more Arkansas baseball talk, we've got you covered with the Diamond Hawks podcast. You can find that on the HawgBeat YouTube. You can find that on HawgBeat.com or just wherever you get your podcast, you can find it. But we just don't have enough time to talk more Arkansas baseball right now. So I will remind you that Round Rock Classic this weekend, each game got moved up. They're all at 4:00 now. So you got Indiana 4:00 Friday, Stanford 4:00 Saturday, Louisiana 4:00 Sunday. All of those will be on Flow Baseball. Unfortunately, you got to pay for that. So have fun paying for that. I will be in Round Rock and I will be watching it. So Hutch, you're going to have to pay for it, but you're going to get to go to the Kentucky game. So congratulations. Anyways, don't respond to that because we got to go. Thank you for listening to the HawgBeat Hour. Thank you, Andrew Hutchinson. Thank you to Alex Trader. And thank you for listening.